Welcome to Wake Up with Marci, a deep dive into self-discovery. I'm your host, Marci Hopkins, and this is the space where we get real about life, transformation, and finding our true selves. Hello, all, and welcome back to Wake Up with Marci, the show where real conversations lead to real transformation. I am so glad that you are here with me today. Today's episode is all about something we crave, and that is connection, but not just surface level connection. I'm talking about deep, emotional, authentic connection with ourselves and the people we love. Relationships can be so hard, but there is hope, and it starts with understanding yourself. Yes, that's what I said. It's not about changing the other person, it starts with you. And that is what we're going to learn about today. If you are looking to grow in all relationships in your life, then this show is for you. Our guest today is someone who's doing truly transformational work in his space, and that's all about relationships. Todd Payne is a seasoned relationship coach with over 25 years of experience. He's the founder of Connect Fully and the creator of Relationship Renewal Program, a powerful process that goes far beyond traditional therapy to address the emotional habits that quietly erode our connections. Todd's journey has taken him from ministry to coaching, and after a wildfire forced him and his family to rebuild their lives, he relocated to Portugal, where he is now, and now coaches individuals, couples, and teams across the globe. Today, we'll talk about emotional intelligence, the Enneagram, which that one was new to me. So I'm excited to hear more about that. And I will tell you, I took that test and I'm a people pleaser. And
Does
and
this
so
surprise
how,
you?
yeah, it really didn't. I already knew that. And where we can, stop the same patterns that we have in relationships and
Yeah.
start building real relationships that thrive. So let's dive in. Todd, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It is truly an honor to be here with you and to be talking about this wonderful possibility and hope that is for everyone who is in a relationship with another human being, right?
Yeah, because, spoiler alert, we're all different. And even if we can say like one's a people pleaser and another one's we're different, and then and how we
It's
perceive
it's
things and how
interesting.
we
We
process.
We are, and sort of on a cognitive level, we can all consent to that assertion. But on the other hand, we also all kind of operate as though everybody wants what we want and thinks what we think and values what we value and are surprised when they behave differently than we would behave. So that's one key
Yeah.
thing as well, is to not
Yeah, we'll
only
break that
acknowledge that
down.
people are different, but yeah,
Exactly,
good.
exactly. So for you though, your
Yeah,
journey started with a failure. And I'd love
yeah,
for you to share more about that and what was
yeah.
breaking down in your relationships at that time.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I did not grow up in a religious family. I never really went to church of any kind. I did follow a girlfriend in college to church because that's what boys do. We follow our girlfriends where they want to take us. But while I was there at church, I had really what could be described as a religious experience. And out of that came a calling to serve in the ministry. But when I told my parents that I was going to become a minister, my father said, "You can't be a pastor. You're terrible with people." And
Oh,
sure enough, after a year-long internship, several years into the training, my supervisor filled out my evaluation with the words, "Todd has none of the gifts and skills essential for ministry." The big
oh,
failure that set me on my journey was that I just was
right.
so bad with people, I didn't even know that I was bad with people. And it was a long, hard road to understand how to interact with people, how to lead people, how to, just be a human being. But that's ultimately what led me to the work I do now in relationship coaching. Because when you're failing math class, don't go to the kid who aces without doing the homework for tutoring. Go to the one who
Right.
failed last year and this year is passing, because they're the ones who can walk you through how to solve the problems. And that's really
Right.
where I have ended up.
Yeah. Well, I think it's hard to be in relationships. anyway, and
Period.
we bring our baggage. Uh, Communication is really hard. But one of the things that you said was, well, that your father said, and also the gentleman in the ministry, is that you weren't good with people. Why would they say that?
I burned bridges. I stepped on toes. I remember one instance in particular where I got into a tug of war match over the American flag with a World War II veteran, whether it should be on the altar, in the altar space in the church. So just I didn't really have a sense of how my words and actions impacted other people. And like we were talking about earlier, that awareness of the fact that other people are different, that was also not really on my radar. I didn't understand how to read what people were saying or their actions through their own motivations, through their own understanding of the world. I was always taking it in very personally.
And I've learned so much of this, through all of my healing and my own training, right? To be able to understand other people's perceptions
Right.
and not realizing that I'm not always right, right? Like we
Mhm.
just because we feel strongly about something doesn't mean somebody else does. And why do we so inherently believe, like, if we believe something, that someone else must believe that? And if they
Yeah,
don't, they are wrong.
right. You just put your finger. I was going to say there's two pieces to that, and that's the second one is a false sense of black and white, right and wrong. You
Yeah.
can feel the way you feel about it. I can feel the way I feel about it, and we can both be completely valid, and have a sort of emotional integrity and internal logic that makes sense and is coherent. And yet they don't have to agree, and that is a very difficult space to mature into, a sort of holding open multiple perspectives, being comfortable with gray or with lack of resolution. So that's certainly one part. But the simpler explanation is that that's just what it means to grow up. It's just what it means to
Mhm.
be a child in a human body and a
Yeah.
teenager in a human body. And we grow into adulthood, and we really don't even have the capacity to understand what you and I are talking about until our brains are 20 years developed. And then we've got to go on the journey of discovery, because it's not intuitive. As I said
Yeah.
before, we kind of graduate childhood with the belief that everybody's like we are. But it's a process of discovery to just, to learn that they're not, and how to integrate what we discover about other people with our own experience.
Right. Right. So you yourself went through a huge trial and error,
Yes.
learning period.
Yeah.
But let's
Yes.
talk about this Enneagram that you found,
Excuse me.
and share with us exactly what that is and about
Yeah.
the framework, and how did that work for you? How did that create the shift for you?
Yeah, great question. After 15 years of professional ministry, I had my feet under me. I understood a lot. I had, as you said, learned the hard way, trial and error. Sometimes I call it the rock tumbler. When I got a sabbatical, a 3-month sabbatical, and my bishop said to me, "Well, this isn't just a chance to sleep in on Sunday. What are you going to do to improve yourself, to learn and grow over the sabbatical?"
Mhm.
And I didn't have a good answer. And so he said, "I think you should learn about the Enneagram." And he sent me to a coach, and he gave me some materials. And what I discovered in the Enneagram was all those lessons I had learned the hard way, all those anecdotes, all those rules to thumb. There was a structure and a framework that I could put them in, and everything made sense. It was as if I was sort of looking through the trees, and all of a sudden was 30,000 feet up looking at the whole landscape, and everything really made sense. And I came back from that sabbatical, and I used it with my staff, with my committees, my volunteers, with my parishioners, and discovered the power that it holds for transforming the way that we interact with one another. So that's how it came to be my main focus. Eventually, I decided I'd had enough evenings and weekends, and I retired from the ministry, and now I do this full time. Um, but to answer your question, what is it? It's an ancient system of understanding what motivates human beings. And it goes back 2,500 years or more. And what separates it from other systems of personality like Myers Briggs or DISC, big five, is that it's really less about observable behavior traits. It's not about what we do out in the world, as it is about the story we tell ourselves. Because we all walk around all day long saying, I deserve this, I was wronged in this way, I should be doing this, I'm a bad person for doing this. And that inner narrative we sort of feel like is organic and it's who we are. But
Mm,
in truth, there are sort of only 9 stories that human beings tell themselves. And they're survival strategies. They're the ways that
yeah.
we have succeeded in the world.
Hmm.
But we tend to rely on them as the only tool in our tool belt, and they're not applicable in every time and place and situation. So it's really about learning, what are my patterns? How do they serve me? How do they get in my way or hinder me? And what do I do in those instances? And then I also use it. You made an excellent point in the opening about the change. We can't change our partner; we can only change ourselves. But one thing the Enneagram does that I haven't found anywhere else is it reveals our partner to us. It gives
Mm,
us a backstage view, why they perceive the world the way they do, why they respond in the ways they do. And when we have this backstage view, when we see the suffering our partner goes through just being who they are, in the same way we suffer for being who we are,
yeah.
there's this beautiful empathy that blossoms. There's this
Yeah.
space that grows between us that we
Hmm.
can now be in, that connection begins and grows.
Yeah. And let me tell you, listen, I brought so much baggage into my relationship with, and I'll just say my husband, right? We'll just talk about that right now because a lot of times our love relationships are, I don't know, priority
Yeah.
for some reason.
Yeah,
But
of course.
I used to be a victim and I had all the pain that I had. And I was always like, he was wronging me.
Yeah.
And and he had what he brought into the relationship and how his parents raised him.
Right.
And I always said, like, he had his head in the clouds all the time because he thought he came from this perfect background. And hey, good for him. But I
Great.
also, like, today, just because of how far I've become, I've come in my healing and learning about emotional intelligence and these things that you're talking about, and having empathy for others, and just an understanding that he handles the way things that he does, like in our relationship or in parenting, because that's how he was parented.
Yeah.
And so these are things he's learned. It doesn't mean that we can't talk about them, or now that
Right.
I can share, like, my perspective, understand his
Right.
perspective, and we maybe meet in the middle instead of just like, you're wrong, right? And
Right.
it does create this, like, my relationship with my husband today is completely different.
Hmm.
I mean, of course, nothing's perfect and we have our moments, but
Of course.
at least even if we act in a way that is not so nice, we can
Hmm.
quickly turn it around and go, wait a
Hmm.
minute, like, that was
Hmm.
not a good way to respond. I reacted, so
Hmm.
there is so much power in what you are talking about in creating this change. And let's talk about the emotional intelligence element of this. So can you share more about that?
Absolutely, absolutely. I wanted to just to piggyback quickly on the last comment that you made and
Mhm.
say that it's often a moment where chains fall off relationships when we come to the realization that our partner's words and actions frequently say more about what's going on with our partner than they do
Mhm.
about us,
Mhm.
and it depersonalizes. And he's not attacking me, he's just responding the way his brain responds. And then there's
Yes.
this space that opens up. So I think you really
Love that.
touched on it beautifully. To your question, emotional intelligence, I like to say the Enneagram is the car that we're going to ride in, but emotional intelligence is the road we're going to drive down.
Oh,
And
I like that.
um, as I work with my clients, I tell them that there's four pillars to emotional intelligence, and think of them like staves of a barrel. Whichever of the staves is the shortest is where all the water pours out. So we've got to kind of make sure we build up all of four of these pillars of emotional intelligence. And they are self-awareness, which the Enneagram reveals our patterns to us so that we don't have to hunt around in the dark and do trial and error to discover them. Self-management, and the Enneagram again gives us pointers by saying, this is what the path of growth for your type looks like. Partner awareness or other awareness. And that's where that empathy comes in, where I can see, wow, my wife, this is how she perceives the world. This is how she reacts to the world.
Yeah.
And then the fourth is interaction management or relationship management. We can't manage our partner, obviously, but we can be aware in the ways you were just describing with your husband of how we interact, how it affects our partner, how to recover from missteps, that sort of stuff. So those are the four key pillars that emotional intelligence can equip us, and the Enneagram
Yeah.
can help us along the way.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. That's the car and then the road, the journey. I like that. So let's talk about I mean, you're speaking my language right now, and I'm 100% behind, and I don't just believe, I know that it works.
Yeah. Yeah.
But let's talk about like traditional therapy, because most times, right? Like we have
Hmm.
our own therapist, or maybe
Hmm.
if we're lucky, our partner will agree to go to therapy with you,
Right.
And what's your feeling on traditional therapy?
Well, I certainly think therapy has its place, and I have been in behavioral therapy of various kinds since I was a child. I endorse it fully as part of mental health. But
Mhm,
coaching is a different thing than therapy. And I'm not a therapist, I'm a coach. And
mhm,
coaching is really, where are we now? Where do we want to be? And
mhm,
sometimes therapy is, where are we now? How did we get here? And
mm,
the coaching paradigm is less concerned about how we get here. We still have to visit that stuff because it informs what our choices are moving forward. But we don't try to unpack it and solve it.
yeah,
Instead, we begin with a lay of the land and a
uh-huh,
vision of the future, and begin to construct a plan to get us from where we are to where we want to be.
right, right. So I've done therapy a lot for
Hmm.
myself. And I think it is important. But I will say, like a coach, the things that you're doing, it just it helps to create change in your life in a way that a therapist cannot. And yeah,
Yeah, at
yeah.
times that's true.
And again, I'm a huge fan of therapy, and you brought
Right.
up behavioral therapy. I mean, there's all different types of therapy, right?
Of course.
Um, and in relationship therapy that I had with my husband, it was good because it allowed him to hear why I am the way that I am, right?
Yes.
And with abuse, like when somebody has abuse in their childhood and abandonment and all of these different things, and raised by an alcoholic
Hmm.
mother, and
Hmm.
there's a lot of pain that is
Yeah.
there. And when you come from a much better background, it's hard to understand, right? There's so much more than just the surface. uh how things start, right? So you bring in
Yeah.
your best self, and then everything starts you start to see uh, through that, because life happens, and more responsibilities happen and such. So, um, again, hand in hand, I think very, very
Hand in
good.
hand. But I
Yeah.
find a
So
lot
let's,
of couples, when
yeah.
they come to me, really are interested in a shift that's measurable, that's sustainable, and often they
Mhm.
really want to experience it quickly. And coaching really can leverage those points. And using the Enneagram gives us, the heart of the matter in just a few sessions. So people are feeling the difference in 14 days, 21 days,
Wow.
instead of
Wow.
sometimes feeling like they have to go months of therapy to really dig in and get behind what's happening.
Well, in the way that we are today, we need that quick. Quick fix.
Yeah,
So that
it
sounds
is. It
good.
is. It is. It's the social media revolution, isn't it? 6 seconds
Uh,
or less.
so let's talk about your program. I mean, you've touched on it. Collective connect. Let's see, connectfulies,
Connect
right?
fully. Yeah,
Connectfulies,
connect fully.
relationship,
Yeah.
renewal. Yes, yes. So
Yeah.
tell us a little bit, like, what's the process and what all do
Mhm.
you share within your program?
That's a great question. Thank you. It's a 16-week program, sort of a boot camp. A lot of the folks I work with continue with me after that 16 weeks, but the nature changes. And in that 16 weeks, we do learning about what the Enneagram is and how it understands people, which gives us some common language and
Mhm.
sort of neutral ground to talk about one another. In the Enneagram, there are 9 personality types, and we simply use numbers. So instead of saying about my wife, I don't like when you XYZ, I can say, it's a tendency of type 2. That's my wife's type. It's a tendency of type 2 to do these things, which I don't know how to handle. And now I'm not attacking her.
Yeah.
It creates that neutral ground. So we learn about the
Oh, yeah.
system. And then we do a deep dive. I meet with the couple together, but I also meet one-on-one with each partner. And we do a
Yeah.
deep dive into your type, and your partner and I do a deep dive into their type. And then we come back together and we talk about who we are and why, and share with our partner and learn an insight. Then we split up again, and I do a deep dive with you about your partner, with your partner about you, so that we
Yeah.
can really understand that behind the stage, or behind the curtain view, and learn tips and tricks. How do I speak to a type 2 so that they hear me? When I'm listening to a type 2, what should I be listening for?
Yeah.
Then that brings us to about the halfway point in the program. And now we've got the structure in place, the language in place. We've been doing exercises to build trust and safety, emotional safety with one another. Now we begin to address the issues that really brought you to me to begin with, and in a bespoke fashion, knowing what your type is, knowing what your partner's type is, knowing what those interactions look like. And now we can begin to sort of shift the weight around, have important conversations, and that's where the real blossoming, the transformation can take place. Is everything solved at the end of 16 weeks? By no stretch.
Yeah.
But are you now equipped with confidence, with tools, with a little bit of experience under your belt to handle the conversations that are to come? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So what about somebody that's just, they're exhausted. They think that they're at the end of
yeah,
their relationship, that they
yeah.
don't see a way out. Is there a way out? Is there a way to change that?
I would love to say always, forever. Of course, there is. But I have
Yeah.
also been a partner to conscious uncouplings, which is sometimes the healthiest thing for everyone involved. But I would like to say that hope is probably the most powerful human motivator. Fear is a strong one, and a lot of us
Mhm.
get trapped in cycles of fear or respond out of fear. But hope is stronger even still than fear.
Yeah.
And even for those who are exhausted, who don't see a way out, I like to lift up that we can only think of the options that we can think of. One of
Mhm.
the reasons we go to a coach or a guide is because they have a different perspective. They can bring a different language or a different set of tools. And those can often make the difference because they're new, because they're alternative. They come at things in a different way. So I like to lift up that if you haven't done this particular way of seeing yourself and your partner, that is the Enneagram, if you haven't done work in emotional intelligence, then all hope is not lost. There is
Yeah.
plenty of things that we can still be doing to save, what is meaningful and, um,
I
deep and
Exactly. And I'm gonna go back to before I started my work on myself, right? Because the only thing
mm,
we can change is ourselves.
that's right.
Is I I did not think I wanted to be married to my husband anymore. And we
Mm,
now are at the most beautiful place, and I'm in the best relationship, and I never thought that that would be possible. So I'm telling you that it is. But there is work involved. You've
of
got to get
course.
educated. You've got to create change within yourself, and you've got to change how you respond and understand your partner. So, and
And I like to
And
say that we all human beings grow as we live.
yeah,
That's just how we are in the world. So the
yeah.
choice as a relationship is, are we going to grow together or are we going to grow apart?
And that's
We're
okay because
going to
sometimes it doesn't
grow.
work. Yeah,
But
right.
sometimes it doesn't. But with
Yeah,
with intentionality, with awareness and intentionality, we can grow together and have that beautiful vision you've just painted that you and
making
your
that
husband share.
choice. Yeah. So can you give us like 2 tools that maybe couples somebody's out there listening right now that could help maybe to interrupt some of their unhelpful patterns with their partners?
Sure. The first tool I give to everybody in my first session when we get together, it's a very simple tool. It's just a horizontal line. Just think of a horizontal line in your mind. At any point in time, every human being is either above the line or below the line. When we're above the line, we're curious, we're open, we're willing to question our beliefs, we're playful. When we're below the line, we're committed to being right, we are defensive, we're closed off. It is the default nature of the human brain to be below the line. It is evolved as a threat detection system. So being on alert is the way the brain is. But it's tough to be in dialogue. It's tough to have meaningful connection. It's tough to make positive change when we're below the line. So a simple tool I teach right out of the gate is just to ask your partner and to ask yourself, am I above the line or am I below the line? You're not a good person or a bad person for being in one place or the other. It's not right or wrong. But what it does do is it informs whether or not this is the right time to have a conversation or this is the right time to reach out and make a connection or not. And it spares a lot of pain and heartache, a lot of that personal insult from your partner snapping at you or whatever. And you just do a quick check-in with yourself
Yeah.
and with your partner. So that's the first tool I would recommend.
And yeah, so I asked for 2. Can we have another
I
one?
know. I know you did. The other one I'm just going to sort of touch on briefly. It's a little bit more complicated, but I think people can appreciate where it's coming from. It's about slowing down the process of conversation. And I call it the 3-time rule. And what we do is that in the first time, I come to you and I say, Marci, I've been thinking about this. Are you in a place that you can hear my thoughts? And your job is just to hold the space open and ask curious or clarifying questions and let me share where I'm at. Then we allow at least 24 hours to pass before we have the second time. And the second time, the roles are reversed. You're going to come to me and say, Todd, I thought about what you said, and here's where I'm at. I'm going to hold the space open with only curious or clarifying questions and allow you to really share. Then 24 more hours pass. We come to the third time. And now we've both had a chance to be heard in full. We've both had a chance to reflect on what the other said. Now we can really enter into meaningful conversation that isn't reactive. And I find that just slowing the process down intentionally in those ways, being sure that everybody gets heard, can
Yeah.
really make that third conversation quite productive.
Well, that sounds amazing. You have to make a lot of changes, right, to do something like that.
To
And
hold that space open requires some skills and some practice. Yeah,
exactly,
absolutely.
you gotta take a little work on that. So, let's just say if somebody's not at that place yet, what are just some easy little things like they could do to respond instead of react, right? Like you get the
Hmm.
email that ticks you off.
Hmm.
Somebody has said something that you've taken in a certain way, even if they maybe didn't intend
Hmm.
it that way, or
Hmm.
your your kid pisses you off. Like, what can you do to
So
respond
in
instead of react?
there's a tiny little 3 steps that I invite folks into. I call it RDR, which is recognize, disengage, redirect. The first thing that I invite everybody to do is to become more in tune with our bodies. Our hearts are always looking to the past and how things were and how they might have been. Our brains are always looking at the future, at the threat and concern and worry. But our physical body is always in the present moment. I like to say you don't have to pee next week. You weren't hungry yesterday. So we learn all of this great information about what's going on with us from our bodies. So we have
Yeah,
to first learn, what does being ticked off do to me? Do I clench my jaw? Do my
yeah,
palms get sweaty? Do our voice get loud? So that we can recognize when we're triggered. Then we want to disengage, take a walk, do a breathing meditation, write a note, somehow get yourself out of that situation, because rarely is it as urgent as it seems. It doesn't have to be resolved in this minute. We can just break and allow our system to reset. The nervous system, those chemicals that go through our mind because we get worked up, they have a half-life. And if we
Yeah.
can just breathe through it, we will
Yeah.
return to a better state. And then redirect, which is pick a different way to approach the issue that you're struggling with now that you're in a new space.
A different way to react and approach it. But another one that was a big one for me to learn was
Hmm.
when you approach a conversation,
Yes, that's the above the line,
right?
below the line. That's
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
When is everything.
Yeah. Because it's like if somebody's not in a good headspace or they're busy or frantic, like, and then you're trying to like load them up with something that you want to talk about, it's not going to go well.
I know I'm
So,
saying to my teenage children all the time, timing, timing,
yes.
dad, can I have timing? You're asking at the
Yeah.
wrong time.
Right. Right. But I think that that's just, somebody has had this guttural feeling all of a sudden, and then they're just like right at it. And yeah.
And you know what? A lot of the work that I do with folks is around emotional resilience, which is the
Mm,
capacity to sit with your negative feelings and not be controlled or driven by them. And
mhm.
that's a big part of the relationship getting better, is not, being triggered so quickly,
Yeah.
and knowing when I'm triggered, okay, this is how I change that. Um, Rather than those patterns that happen when I respond reactively and then you respond reactively, and that's what we're
Right.
trying to interrupt.
So I feel like we've talked a lot about relationships, right? And changing that. But one of the things that I did bring up, it's about changing yourself. How can we even become somewhat self-aware that, like, I have someone in my life, they can't keep a job, they can't stay in a relationship,
Mm.
it's everyone else's
Mhm.
fault. When do
Mhm.
you become aware, like, what's the one thing not changing, right? Is m it
What's the common denominator?
I'm yeah, the common denominator, right, the common denominator. And so,
Yeah.
like, even with me and trying to change my life, I kept changing and moving and doing all these different things, and things would fall apart, and then finally, I would be like, "What's the one thing I'm always taking with me that's never changing? Me." So
Me.
that's why it's never
Yeah.
changing. Yeah, yeah, so how can we start to become self-aware? Like, is there a way for us to start, like, having some sort of questions we ask ourselves or thought process? Or I mean, I know not everybody's going to do it, but is there a
Well,
way?
yeah, and I'll begin by saying I'm a firm believer when the student is ready, the teacher appears. So, curiosity about maybe this podcast, this conversation, that
Mhm.
might be the sign that you're like, okay, maybe I'm ready to learn some more. So just be open to little curiosities. But to answer your question about how, that's really where the Enneagram comes in. I
Mm.
discourage people from taking tests, because when we take an Enneagram test, then it becomes about how accurate the report is or how accurate the
Mm.
profile is.
Oh,
When we
interesting.
learn about the system, then what
Uh-huh.
we do is we find ourselves in it, and it almost becomes an act of confession. I am a type 5. That means these wonderful things, but it also means this shadow side. I own it. One of the ways that I discovered that I am a type 5 is that as I was reading one of the Enneagram books, there was a line in print that I swear, as I read it, I thought to myself, I have never told anybody this. And there it is in print. So
Wow.
clearly, this thing knows how I function, how my brain works. And
Right.
I get chills just talking about it. But those are the moments that bring self awareness about. But it starts with the curiosity and the desire. And then this
Yeah.
system will give you tools and finger holds and footholds to, crack that shell and emerge with new self awareness.
So when you started doing this work and seeing these changes, and you're a type 5, which I
Yeah.
guess if you do this work, you'll figure out what that is. How many types are there? 9, you said?
Nine, nine. That's right. Ennea means nine in Greek.
Oh, I gotcha. I gotcha. Okay, thank you. Um, yeah, but like when you start figuring out about yourself, and
Hmm.
then you start figuring out about your partner, Like,
Hmm.
what
Well, let me tell a
have can
story
you
maybe that
discover through that if you are even adaptable, or is like are there more adaptable people for each other that you could learn that through the Enneagram? Or is it
everybody
just
has a
learning how
difficult.
yeah,
Yeah, everybody has a difficult road to hoe. One of the interesting things about the Enneagram is that it paints a picture of of maturity. We know what an unhealthy, immature type 5 looks like. We know what an average type 5 looks like. We know what a self-actualized type 5 looks like. And that's part of how it helps you grow is it shows you the arc, what's next, where to go, how to get there.
yeah,
But I'll share a quick story. So as a type 5, I'm a head-centered type. I take the world in as data. Everything must be tested and proved. My
okay,
wife is a heart-centered type. Type 2, everything is about relationship. Everything is about connection. And as we're raising our children when they were very little, and she has a degree in human development, by the way, she says, this is the better way to parent. This is the better way for us to handle this particular
mm,
situation. And
mhm,
I said, no, 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 I know better. Why didn't I listen to my wife? I don't know. But because of the Enneagram, she said, my husband takes things in through data. So she found an article in Psychology Today and she sent it to me. And when I saw the data, when I read it and processed it that way, I was like, oh, thank you for sending me that. And now I'm totally on board with the things that she wants to do. So she just had to talk to me in a different way rather than
right,
saying, hey, trust me, because I don't do things in that way. I do things with data. She does things in relationships. So learning each other's vocab, learning each other's points of importance or priority is really a
mhm.
key to using the Enneagram in relationships.
So what if you have a lot of trauma from your past
Yeah,
and,
trauma
you know,
makes
that
everything hard, difficult, doesn't it?
yeah, because it's not just about discovering like, "Oh, this is how I
Right,
process information." I mean, you do,
right.
but like in a yeah, in a very well, I believe in a even a more warped way because like your brain has
Yeah,
changed. Yeah.
100%.
And
And that's
and so how do we change our brains? Because, you know, I had to rewire my brain and there were many things that I had to do.
It's one of the beautiful things about the human brain that we are now discovering that the neuroplasticity lasts all the way to the end, and it seems like perhaps even beyond the end
Yeah.
somehow. So there
Uh-huh.
is never a point where we can say, "Well, I'm too old; my brain won't do new things." But as I understand it, neural pathways are like ski runs. The more we go down them, the more compacted the snow gets, the faster the turns become. And doing things in new ways is like cutting through fresh snow. It's hard to do, it's physically exhausting. And
Mhm.
that's the case. So when we want change, probably the most important ingredient is being gracious with ourselves, is
Mhm.
being patient and forgiving and recognizing this is not a linear journey from A to B to C to D. This is a journey of fits and starts. This is a journey of successes and setbacks. And when we are patient and gracious with ourselves, then we have the fertile ground to do the work that lay ahead. And it takes years. It took me years. I'm sure it took you years too. But that doesn't mean there aren't things we can get going on right away
Mhm.
to begin to feel some relief.
Do you think that within a job, I was just thinking about, you know, someone in a job and they're really unhappy in their job and they
Mm.
say they can't get along with their boss, right?
Hmm.
Um, and again, you know, this is, I think about it today, like as someone in a role that is over, let's say, a department, you know, they're answering to the higher ups and they
Right.
have a lot of stress to perform, and someone under them may not understand what their perspective or why they are potentially the way that they are. Not saying that they shouldn't manage better because that's also a skill, learning how to
It's
manage
absolutely
people.
a skill. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people out there managing people that are not good. I at one
Yeah.
time was one of those people because
Me too.
I was thrown into a job that I had no idea what I was doing and I had to learn everything and I was an utter nightmare to other people. So I own it. I own it. But so you think that you're so unhappy in your job, right? And I hate my
Mhm.
boss and this is that. like what can we do, because you're not going to therapy with your boss. What can you
Right.
do to try to shift things to try to help it to be better for you in a way, like to rethink it, not take it personally, and maybe if you can make some shifts for yourself, maybe the job wouldn't be as bad as you think it is.
Yeah, there's a longitudinal study that Harvard has done. I think it goes back maybe 70 years now about what makes people happy, and what they've discovered is that the quality of our relationships is the number one indicator of our happiness. So you really put your
Mhm.
finger right on it. I think there's a couple of things I would lift up. First and foremost is we tend, I think, in our modern culture to put a lot of eggs in one basket. And there's good science that shows the more areas that we have social connections, then when they go south in one of those areas, we are more resilient. So having a club or a hobby that you meet with people, or a trivia team, or a train building club, whatever, I don't know, having your family, being on in a church community, or in a choir, or in some sort, and then there's work.
Yeah.
When all we do is work, when I see my wife for a couple of minutes in a day, and I'm with my boss for 10 hours, 5 days a week, then it feels like it's my everything, and it can really dampen my whole life. So diversify, almost like a financial advice, diversify is one of the
Yeah.
ways that we can find some of that joy and happiness. The other is that when we do understand, like maybe what our boss's Enneagram type might be, it really can reveal why they do things the way they do. And again, it depersonalizes it. And it can give you some tools like, if your boss happens to be an eight, the eights value strength. So when you talk to him strong instead of being
Yeah.
polite and kind. Or maybe he's a four and he values creativity. All right, well, let's come to him with unique things. And like we can sort of meet people where they're at by recognizing what they value, what moves them, what motivates them.
So if you can't do that though, is there something like, can you take the Enneagram yourself and then
you know
like try to make changes for yourself so you can help yourself
The
in that
Enneagram is
situation?
sort of, it has large categories, and they get ever more refined. So even if
Uh-huh.
we don't know what our boss or our partner or our neighbor's type is, we can begin with large scale questions like heart center, head center, body center. And we there try different tactics and see, and then narrow, and then see, and then narrow. So for me, at least, this is how I do it. But again, I've been studying the system for a while. But when you have the system in hand, you can begin to spot it. You
Yeah.
recognize people behave in these ways. There's only really truly, it's archetypal. You know what I mean? So you're looking for archetypes,
Yeah.
and when you have an understanding of them, you can begin to spot them.
Yeah.
I spot people pretty
So,
quickly. So
oh, okay. So if you kind of understand the whole program or that
mhm.
formula of and
That
the different
system, yeah,
types of the
yeah,
system, you can actually manage how you'll identify like maybe who somebody is. Like they're a
yeah.
9, so this is how maybe I should manage that
Yeah,
person.
I
Is
like
that
to
what you're
think
saying?
about it I like to think about it like musical scales. If I don't know if you know
Uh-huh.
much about music, but there's A and A sharp and B
Yeah.
and C sharp. So if you think about the personality types, like each of us being a different key, then what I do is I play in your key. So I might talk to
Mhm.
my child who's a 6 in one way, and then my wife who's a 2 in another way. You get same
Yeah.
message, same content, but played in a different key so that they heard me. And that's what you
Ah,
begin to recognize is the key
I like
that
that.
the other person
Yeah.
is playing in. And I can talk to you for an hour, and at the end of that, I'm like, oh, I know you're playing in the key of 3. Like that's who you are. And that's fine. That's great.
Am I
Now
a
I'm just
3,
going to
Todd?
adjust, and
Am I a
I don't
3?
know.
No.
I don't know. You've been
Well, I like what you're saying, and I really want people to hear this outside too, everyone listening, is that remember when parenting our children, you can't parent them the same. They're
No, you
not the
cannot.
no.
No, and
And
they
and
don't
how
necessarily grasp that.
yeah, and it's
It
hard and it's
it is.
just and I also like and this is for me and God hopefully no one hates me, but I can't stand it when somebody says, Well, I had to do it this way when I was 10. Like, we are like in a different generation. Everything's changed. We have to evolve. And,
Yeah,
it's
just in
very
the 6
different
years
today.
between my oldest and my youngest, I've had to evolve
Yeah.
as a parent as the world has
y-
changed, and they'll say, "Why did my
Yeah.
sister get something I didn't get?" And I'm saying, "Well, you and your sister are different people. You're gonna be parented differently."
Yeah. And I like what you said also, like finding things that you enjoy. That's so important. Don't live for
Mm,
somebody else. And
mm-mm.
because I did that myself, I got lost in everybody else. And because I didn't know who I was. I mean, that was part
Right.
of my trauma, and I had lost myself. And I was always trying to find happiness and validation through other people. And it's really when I found the love and connection with myself, my inner self, like
Mhm.
going within
Mhm.
instead of outside of myself, that so
Mhm.
much changed. But I'm
Mhm.
just fascinated because it's just, I just feel like it's hard to have good relationships. It's
It's
hard
hard
to
work.
communicate. It's hard to
It
understand other
is.
people. And then just even on society and politically, everything's so divided instead of like
Yes.
just understanding we can have different ideology and just different ways of thinking. So it's just so important to have these conversations. So
Yes.
hopefully, like you said, whenever that student is ready to be taught, the teacher is there, right? And you can't make anyone listen or be ready. They have to be ready for themselves.
That's right.
So
But it only takes just the desire. That's it. It doesn't take
yeah,
any skill, doesn't take any
yeah.
experience, doesn't take any readiness, just desire.
All right. So for those that are ready to dive in right now, so where can they find you and learn more?
So, as you've mentioned, my company I founded is called Connect Fully, and we live in a world where you can spell things however you like. So it's spelled with a
I
K,
know. Connect
K-O,
fully.
yeah, Konnectfully. You can reach me, connectfully.com. You just shoot me an email, Todd at connectfully.com. I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram. You'll find me all over, but I like to hear from people. I'm learning. I certainly don't have a corner on knowledge, and I find every couple brings unique stories of success and challenge and how they've overcome it. So I would love to hear where people are at, where their wins are, where their struggles are. So yeah, reach out to me, connectfully.com.
Connect fully. I made that a little difficult for myself earlier. But I thank you all so much for joining us today. And thank you, Todd, for joining Wake Up with Marci. And if this episode has brought you clarity, hope, or a new perspective, it would mean so much if you could share it to somebody that needs it, a friend, a partner, a family member, anyone that needs this message. Because here's the truth: working on relationships doesn't mean that it's broken. It means that you love yourself, that relationship, that person enough to grow. And often
That's
that
right.
growth begins with yourself. So thank you again, Todd, for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you all for listening, watching, sharing this episode, and helping to spread the message to others that may need it. You never know whose life you're going to change just by pressing that share button. So thank you again for joining me today. It is time to wake up to your worth, because your past doesn't define you. You are not alone, and it's never too late to become who you are meant to be. So I'll see you next time on Wake Up with Marci.